Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm your host, John Connors. I'm also the founder and head instructor of Connors Martial Arts. We're here at 180 Cary Place in Norwood, Massachusetts. We teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai kickboxing, mixed martial arts. Send us a message, give me a call, send me a text, DM me, write me a note, something, and we will make your
pigeon.
Yes, and we will make your life better. We will add pleasure, fulfillment, significance to your life. You'll get fitter. You'll feel better about yourself. Women will want you, and men will want to be you. How do you think that sounds?
Including if you're a woman?
All right. No, I guess if you're a woman, men will want you. And
or
will
who
want
knows?
to be you. Yeah,
People
whatever.
in general want you and want to be you.
Right. The appropriate somebody will want you, and the other appropriate somebody will want to be you. Whatever works for you. It's all
and
good.
it's 100% guaranteed.
100% guaranteed. Yep. I'll go on a limb and say that. Money back guaranteed. If you
Right.
don't feel
Act fast.
right. Exactly.
This is a limited time.
We're running out of space. Yeah,
Right.
we are. Definitely. How you doing, Dan? My co-host, Dan Robin. How you doing? Yeah. Okay.
I'm all right.
I think that's
It's the end of
6.99.
It's the end of Slovenly July.
Oh,
where I
right.
did
It's
nothing.
over.
I did no working out. No, I slipped a couple times.
You look fantastic.
Accidentally. I feel kind of slovenly.
Huh.
I haven't weighed myself or anything because I don't weigh myself. But
Do you think you have any alien DNA in your system? Because you don't seem to conform to the laws.
I'm more out of shape.
Earthlings.
I'm
Yeah.
I could definitely get back into better shape.
I was listening to that Bob Lazar guy. He was on Rogan. He claims to work near the Area 51, and he's experienced alien spaceships and everything. He's very convincing. If you listen to him, he's not lying. He may be insane.
or
completely
hallucinating,
delusional.
but he's not lying.
He's not lying. So I wonder if aliens have tweaked with your.
But some
DNA.
of it also, we're not going to do an alien episode. We'll just do anyone listening.
The ghost
We've got
episode is
things
so bad. I'm gonna go back and look at those ghost episodes, and I'm gonna retitle them and republish them. Maybe edit them a little bit because there's quality material there.
Wait, so you do like the ghost episode?
I love those are my favorite episodes by far.
But that said,
Yeah.
useful information coming. So we're not going to.
Yes, useful jiu-jitsu, any kind
And
of
life information. Coming.
Exactly.
But for the one thing I'd say about UFOs, also I'm thinking how it has to do with mindset. In that,
Okay.
I've been in Florida, so my dad was in Florida, right?
Right.
And he saw on New Year's Eve, it was like three lights moving exactly together,
Okay.
and then moving apart suddenly, and then back together. In no way a plane would move, no way. Nothing really explained it. And everyone out there's thinking drones. Yeah, I know. I'm not whatever you're thinking of out there, I thought of it. It was weird.
Yeah.
But so he explains it, and of course you're again, the mindset. Some people be like, "Wow." My first mindset, I'm sure yours, is whatever. I don't know I don't know what it was.
Who knows?
But it's something silly.
Could be military jets that left formation and regained
So what happened
formation.
was
I don't know.
a YouTube video came out from Colorado
Okay.
that had the same thing. My dad saw it and goes, "That's what I saw.
That's what he saw.
That's what I saw." And it's pretty weird lights, and no one could explain it. No one in the comments could explain it.
Skydivers?
But all I'm saying is, I think that's impossible too. I think they went back up and stuff.
Right.
But at no point does UFO cross my mind. You know what I mean? Something unexplained to me is I don't know what's happening,
Wait a
but
minute.
I'm sure there's some sort of explanation that I'm just not thinking of. There's the random military explanation. So
But
I think
there's
there's a
gotta be
mindset how open are you to accepting this in any way? And I'm virtually close. There's virtually nothing.
Yeah,
that would make me
even
think
if you're highly skeptical, there's got to be some probability that it is alien craft, even if it's an infinitesimal probability, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's some probability.
Yeah. I had a UFO experience when I was up in Canada in the wilderness. Granted, I did have 3 days with no food. That might have something to do with it. And
Right.
I saw a light that seemed very high up, like a 30,000-foot jet going across the sky.
Could it have been a jet?
Well, that's exactly what I thought it was. So I was looking up because I figured, gee, I'm in the wilderness.
Mhm.
I'm going to see some, you live in Norwood or Boston, you don't get to see hardly any stars at all,
Right.
really, right? And this could be cool. And it was sort of an overcast night, so I didn't see a lot of stars. But I was watching this thing come across the sky like a jet going from wherever to wherever. It took a hard right turn, like a perfectly right angled turn, like immediately. It didn't curve, it didn't twist, it didn't bend. And it seemed like something that a plane wouldn't do, and it seemed like something a Firefly wouldn't do either, because it was so
And then
perfectly
so
straight.
the first people bring up helicopter and drone, which I guess possible, but often
I mean, such a right angle.
Sometimes you see it and you're like, it's hard to explain, but it wasn't a helicopter or drone. Like you know what I mean? Like I saw it. It was not. That's not what it was.
Yeah,
right?
I had no idea what this was, and I wasn't that perturbed by it.
Right. You're just like, I don't know.
I'm like,
right,
I just want to get this dopey Vision Quest over with so I can have something to eat.
I don't care what. I don't care if it was. You're
I
so
would-
hungry. You're like, I
yeah.
don't care if it is a UFO. Who cares?
And I told you my grand theory on UFOs. I hope they are around, because if they are obviously technologically far more advanced than us, and they're wiser than us, because they've somehow gotten to that point without destroying themselves. So they must be morally and ethically far superior to us.
Right. So,
yeah, that's good news.
yeah, well, good luck on that. I think, but the mindset, I think we can actually, this is a tortured transition, but
Yep.
I can apply it back to jiu-jitsu.
All right.
Bear with me. It's the mindset. It's a stubborn mindset that doesn't always serve me well, which is like some people. So one end of the spectrum is gullible. You see a light in the sky, you go, I think UFO. You go, or someone goes, I saw. Someone else tells you they saw a light in the sky, and you go, I believe you, UFO.
Mm.
There's the other end of the spectrum where like, you could tell me whatever you want to tell me, and I'm not going to believe you saw a UFO. Do you know what I mean? Like I could see something I don't understand in the sky, and I'll be like, well, it's not like an alien spacecraft, right? Like almost nothing will convince me.
Well,
But I
at
think-
nighttime when there's lights in the sky, you're looking at, you only have two-dimensional information, so really hard to determine anything, I think.
Right, but some of this is mindset, right? It's like, are you skeptical or not? I'm
Yeah, it's
so
personality
skeptical,
based.
and you've seen this probably coaching me at jiu-jitsu. Like I'm hard to convince of anything, and it can be frustrating for people trying to, like if you can be like, you're getting better, and I'll be like, I'm not getting better, and you'll be like, well, you are. It's just the people around you, blah blah blah, and you'll look over. I've had this for anyone, they'll other coaches and sort of looking at me and being like, he's not listening, and it's annoying to the it's like you're too skeptical. I can't convince you of things. So I think there's probably some optimal level of skepticism and non-skeptic, and
Well, it's
and
very funny
gullibility.
because I would assume that you're fairly open in your personality because you've done a lot of martial arts, you've just done a lot of things, a lot of traveling. So, but you are a very
I'm
rational
opinionated.
thinker. Yeah.
though as well. Like I'm not easily swayed. So I don't think I'm irrational. Like it's not like no matter what you say to me, I'm not listening.
You're not going to join a cult probably
no.
anytime soon.
Like I'm not listening. Yeah, I'm the opposite of cult joiner. I'm the opposite of gullible, but it's hard to convince me of anything. You
can go too far that way. Who's that guy? Michael Shermer, the skeptic guy, Skeptic Magazine. He's on Rogan sometimes, and he's so skeptical that he's biased.
Right.
It's just silly. Like they were talking about meditation. He's like, nothing. I'm like, have you done any research? Have you looked at the research? There's some things they just have a knee-jerk negative reaction to without looking at the data.
And that's a good example because I think I grew up as that extreme skeptic of everything. And I'm actually trying to be, most people I think, I haven't thought this through, but I think most people should be less gullible. Most people should work in that direction. You know what I mean?
I think so.
Whereas I think I'm working towards less skeptical. Like we told the story a long time, like a year ago on this podcast about when, all the way back when in high school, people came and presented about cults to our high school. And we're like, there's a danger, they suck you in with this and that. And I was sitting there just completely flabbergasted. Like who would fall for this? Like who would ever find this appealing or listen to this? Or get on this bus or do it. Who would ever do it? So, but you bring up the good point, which is good to not join a cult, but it's bad because it would apply to things like meditation or yoga or anything, like stretching or, It would just be sort of like, I don't believe it. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? And, if you and even beyond that, there's people who won't even necessarily take good care of themselves. They'll be like, I don't need to eat this, or, I'm not eating a veggie burger, and I'm not going to run. And you know what I mean? Like, sort of like you get that skepticism to the point of like you said, it becomes irrational. It becomes not even logical anymore.
Yeah, I think some of it could be a rationalization for not exerting effort. Like, yeah, that doesn't work. That's a bunch of baloney. Have you tried it? Well, no, that would mean expending energy, and I don't want to do that. So,
well, jiu-jitsu, right? You do have. There's still people out there going, "Oh, it wouldn't work in the street, or it wouldn't help me, or it wouldn't, whatever else." They use the skepticism to avoid doing anything.
Yeah.
So I think I fight against skepticism because being skeptical, you feel. You know what I mean? You feel good. You feel like I'm not going to get taken by anything. I'm not going to be tricked. So you don't, it's a safe position. So you almost, you know what I mean? You're like, if you're sneering at everything, nothing's sort of getting over on you. You know what I mean? Like you're not.
You're really not looking at the data or the research either. So you're not being objective or rational if you're not looking at it.
If you go too far.
Yeah, if you go so far that you don't say, I'm not going to look at the data. I mean, obviously that makes sense if somebody says they found these fairy people in northern England, that doesn't work. Yeah, they do. We have the proof. Just look at the proof. Well, I don't want to look at the proof because I just know it's stupid and nonsense. So, like at some point, you don't want to look at proof of every claim.
Right.
But if enough people are claiming something, it might be worth looking at the proof, even if you don't.
And a side point, and I found this valuable too for getting through skepticism for all you hyper skeptical people out there, it's to listen to some of what people say. I might have talked to you about this, where even if someone says something that makes me roll my eyes, bear in mind the next thing they say might be helpful to me. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like if we say one thing on this podcast that you totally disagree with, don't be like,
right.
Oh, this is the whole. They just keep saying stupid crap, and like dismiss everything. It's like, all right,
that has its limits too, Dan. If somebody's 99.9% of what they say is foolishness, then I'm shutting it off.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's what I'm fighting against. That's my go-to. Is what you're saying. My go-to is shutting all this off.
But we have a cornucopia of great information here.
Yeah, and actually, there's nothing that we've said at all to be disagreed with on this podcast. No. It's all correct. So it's probably a bad example.
I'm so happy you just said that your lovely wife Lucy said that she got some good advice from our podcast, and that makes my week or my month. Perhaps.
And it's not jiu-jitsu advice, which I keep trying to say on this, and it sounds so forced, but a good portion of our jiu-jitsu advice applies to well beyond jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So do you remember what? Well, you just told my wife the advice that you gave. You'll remember how you said it.
I think it was something
this was
about
the advice that my wife took. Who does not do jiu-jitsu. My wife does not do jiu-jitsu and never will.
Never will. No.
But she took this for running a company.
We were talking about communicating, and like you and I are sort of skeptical, nuanced thinkers, and we realized that to be more effective communicators, we need to communicate with certainty and still think and consider with nuance. So think about things with great nuance and then speak with certainty.
Right. And so in the jiu-jitsu context, as a coach, you can't teach a class saying, well, you could do this or this or this or this, because that's the truth of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Any move, there's people, any sport actually, there's amazing, Michael Johnson, one of the fastest men in the world, who runs completely, his form is completely bizarre. Like he stands straight up. He doesn't, he sprints in a weird way. Works for him. I saw some woman won the last, one of the recent New York or Boston marathons, and they were like, she looked so unathletic. Like she ran in and they were like, well, her form's terrible, but she's winning the marathon, and that's the truth of any sport and truth of jiu-jitsu, right? There's principles you want to keep to, but who knows, right? But you
I
can't
totally
teach
agree.
that. You can't teach that way.
I think
can't-
jiu-jitsu is more like that than any other sport. So you can be tall and lanky, short and stocky, everything in between, and you can find a style that's effective for you.
and you can probably find a style that does not work for you.
Yeah.
You know, no matter who you are.
That's part of it. You got to find your style that suits your personality and your body type and your natural attributes.
Right. But you can't coach that way. You can't teach a class saying, I'm going to teach this pass, but you can do it 50 different ways, and it might not work for
Right.
you. And
Yeah,
you
I
have to
try to
teach it.
yeah, I try to stick to conveying principles, Dan. And if I do teach techniques, I, for the most part, like to teach what I would call fundamental escape, where it doesn't matter if you are tall, skinny, or stocky or whatever. It's gonna work
Right.
for you. It's like a starting point. I think you need to know the fundamentals. As like, this is Plan A. You know, we don't always have to do it this way, but let's at least master this so we have something. You
Right.
know.
And again, there are, you know, keep your elbows in is a good principle,
Yeah.
no matter who you are or whatever. You know, like it's not like every single. Although I'm sure there's amazing players who kind of keep their, you know.
You know what I
flail
found, Dan,
around
not
it.
to get too technical, is without the gi, I think that basic fundamentals apply even more. Because once you throw the gi on, now it's like you have a rope on the other person. So you can kind of, quote unquote, break the rules of the fundamentals and still make it work, because if you get the right grips with the material. So with the gi now, with all the different lapel grips they're doing, the worm guard, these different things, it can become very complicated pretty quickly. And it can mess up what would otherwise be pretty solid fundamentals. So there you go. You know, if somebody's effective, that's all that really matters.
Right.
So
But the principle was, and so the example was, you know, speak confidently and with
conviction.
but think with nuance and
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah.
And it's a good example. It perfectly applies outside of jiu-jitsu, and I don't think we're forcing it too much. I mean, it did
No.
apply, right? Like,
Yeah.
I
If you're in
think
a
it's true of lot
leadership
of this stuff.
position, that's probably the way you want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome,
Right.
Dan. So I brought a book for us to look at today.
Right.
So Tim McCarthy, do you know Tim? He trains at Noontime. Super nice guy.
Tim McCarthy.
Yeah, I think Coach Marcello calls him handsome
Oh yeah, I know him.
because he's handsome.
That is that why?
I think that's why. Yeah. Anyways, he's a super nice guy. I had a book that I found of a lot of interest, I sent it his way. You know what? I shouldn't even say it. I sent him a link. Do I get credit for that? I didn't buy him a
You
book
get
and
half
give it to
credit.
him. I sent him the Amazon link for the book.
You don't get a lot of credit.
Don't get a
You
lot
get
of credit for that. Well, I will say I did buy 3 copies of the book, and I did give the book to 3 different students because I thought it was effective. But Tim shot right back, oh, yeah? And he sent me a link to this book. I'll hold it up to the camera. The Little Book of Talent, 52 Tips for Improving Skills by Daniel Coyle. And Daniel Coyle is a really effective writer. He wrote a book called The Talent Code, among some other books. That's the book that I remember reading many years ago. I actually brought it onto the podcast early on and talked about some of his ideas that he came up with. So he basically went around the world interviewing hotbeds of sports success primarily, and found out their approaches. What are they doing differently than everyone else?
So it's sports based, but not necessarily limited to sports.
I think so.
Just like we were just talking
Yeah,
about.
definitely. And it applies to improving skills. So I thought it would be good. You know, I read the book, dog-eared it like I do, like a savage, and scribbled stuff with big stars. This is my notation methodology of some kind of cool things that I thought our audience would find interesting and would probably help them learning jiu-jitsu or
Other skills.
other skills. Yeah.
Everyone wants
And-
to improve skills of some sort.
I
or
think so,
another.
right?
Can't imagine any listener that's like, all my skills are all set.
So I'm going to just pick the ones, Dan, that I find interesting, and then you can hop in with your critiques of it, your thoughts, your digressions, any personal stories you have. So this one is not even in, this is in the introduction, the first idea that I thought was interesting. And he says, always exaggerate new moves. So I think he got this. He went to the Spartak Tennis Club in Moscow, and apparently they create a lot of good young players in tennis. But always exaggerate new moves. And
That's great for jiu-jitsu, obviously.
I think
right?
it is. You know where one of the places I saw this was, there's a famous judo player named Yamashita, and I think he competed for 10 years without losing a match. Just extraordinary. Probably the best competitive judo player of all time. And he was like super heavyweight, but he wasn't that tall. And his favorite technique was Osoto Gari, outside reap. Sort of like a schoolyard trip. And I saw him later in his life as he was coaching, and he would do the technique and say he's reaping with his right leg, and he insisted you have to lift your right leg like 3 or 4 feet off the ground. So he wanted you to get in position, and your reaping leg would go so high that your foot would almost be head high. And that's when you reap the guy. You have to do it this way. Insisted on doing it that way. And then everyone was practicing it that way. And then they show some highlights of his matches. And guess what he did in his matches?
He did not lift his
He did not lift his leg. Hardly at all sometimes. And got the takedown. So when I see that, I go, does he not even know what he's doing?
So that's an interesting point, because we've talked before about instructors in jiu-jitsu that say you have to do, and really good guys, I think even Marcelo Garcia was an example, where they'd say in an instructional, you have to do this, and then you'd watch them and they would not do it. And I always took it as they're not really in tune with what they're really doing. But maybe this is sort of a subtle other explanation.
I think it is.
That they train a certain way to get the move as close to a certain perfection as you can, and then live you don't actually meet that perfection. Like maybe he doesn't get to actually lift his foot that high, but having trained it that way repeatedly, he gets his weight in the right position or something.
I think so. I think what they're doing is compensating for the most common flaw. So perhaps the most common flaw in that technique is you don't lift your foot high enough. So we're going to totally overcompensate, and we're going to ingrain the intention of getting your starting with your foot high, getting a strong reap. And that intention is going to serve us when we go live, and we don't even have the opportunity to lift our leg that high. So I thought that's makes sense to me. That rings true, like a good idea. Because usually when I'm teaching a technique, I've found there is one, perhaps two common mistakes. So in other words, if people do something incorrectly trying to implement this technique, 80% of the time it'll be the same thing they're doing wrong, that the group is doing wrong. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can highlight that most common mistake and overcompensate for it, you're probably going to be teaching more effectively, and the students will be learning more effectively.
And it's a good point that if someone's prone to a certain mistake or a shortcoming, it's not like they have to worry about going too far in the other direction. I've seen that, you know what I mean? Like, so taking away from jiu-jitsu, if it's like someone's very shy, but they have to be doing sales for a company, like, yeah, but I don't want to be too aggressive and too outgoing. And it's like, you're not going to be, look at you.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, why are you worried about that? It's sort of like women like totally out of shape, or men totally out of shape that are like, I don't want to get too muscular. And it's like, don't worry about that. Like don't worry about being too muscular.
Yeah, that is some trick of the mind, so people don't have to actually work out, I think, right?
Right. So I think it's a good point, because so you see the parallel, right? It's don't worry about you're lifting your leg too high in practice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not going to be the problem.
The one out of 100,000 times that happens, we'll deal with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Worry more. Yeah. Right. That's going to be much less of a problem. So
Much
exaggerate things to get rid of problems in the other direction, and don't worry about like, oh, now I've learned to exaggerate this too much. Like, you'll be fine.
Yeah, because the natural tendency is pulling you back to the mean anyways.
Right.
For sure. Here's another one, Dan. What do you think about this? This probably is right up your alley. This is also in the introduction. So we haven't even got into the meat of this book.
We're already learning things.
A couple of nuggets already.
Skills in life.
Small actions repeated over time transform us.
Small actions
Repeated over time.
Yeah,
So
Does he have an example that comes with it?
He says there's no examples for it. No, I think he got this from a vocal coach, believe it or not. My examples is I just find it so much easier if I do something every day than trying to do something 3 times a week, because it just falls off my schedule if I do it less than every day. If I, like my Wim Hof breathing, I'm going to do it every day. I probably average now 6 times a week. But if I didn't have it in my mind to do it every day, I probably wouldn't be doing it at all.
It'd go to 0.
It'll go to 0. Yep. And I've been eating super healthy, getting ready for the World Masters Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament. And my weight was a little funky. So I said, that's it. No cheat meals, no cheat days. I'm just going to eat fruits, vegetables, meat, chicken, fish. That's it. And bam, before you know it, I lose 11 pounds of body fat, and I'm right there. And if I just keep doing that every day, I'm going to be in such a better position than
right. So I totally agree with this, to the point where you might now disagree with me.
All right.
Because I'll give you an example. So I've got to get, I don't know if I'm going to start in August, but latest September, maybe August.
You're going to do drug addicted August?
I've got to, I got to shake off slovenly July.
Okay.
And the usual advice, which I've heard you give too, which is like, look, you're eating this crap, like you got to ease out of sugar, say.
Yep.
Because otherwise you're going to feel miserable.
If you go cold turkey, you're going to just really get a hard withdrawal feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I still leaning towards the hard withdrawal.
Okay.
For the reasons that you're saying, which is like, it's hard if you say, I'm going to ease out of eating chocolate chip cookies. Next thing you know, it can be 2 months later, and you're like, I didn't really ease out. Like I'm still
to shortbread cookies.
Yeah, I'm still sort of eating. I'm eating less, but I think it can be easier to just be like, have in my head, this is gonna suck. Like know it. Like I think there can be breakdown if you don't know, and you're like, okay, diet time. And then you're like, I'm miserable. Forget this. And you drop the whole thing because you're like, I'm suffering.
I think you're right, Dan.
But if you're like, I know it's going to suck and I'm going to have this urge to be like, to drop it ahead of time. So I got to prep myself mentally for that. Then you can maybe go cold turkey. You know what I mean? Be like, all right, I got to get ready because this is going to hit me in a few days and it's going to last about a week or two.
Yeah.
But then when it hits and you're like, here it is. Like here,
if you can pull that off by 3 weeks, you're going to feel like a different human being. If you can do that, for sure. Yeah, that's what I did. 3 weeks, and I think I lost like 11 pounds. So
you think 3 weeks? So I think again, I have to get in my head. This is gonna be hard for 3 weeks, because I think again, if you don't mentally prepare that way, then it comes and you're like, oh, I can't. I feel terrible.
I agree.
Forget this. And you're like, your whole mood goes down. You're like, I don't even care anymore about getting fit and who, forget it. I'm just going to.
I think as far as nutrition is concerned, I upped a lot of the fruit. So we ate a lot of peaches and plums and pluots and cherries. And that sort of soothed me. If I was getting sugar, but you're getting the fiber from the fruit. That's really the way we're supposed to eat sugar.
But I have an important question.
Yeah.
I'm with you through peaches and plums.
Okay.
Then what else did you have?
Dan, I may be pronouncing it incorrectly, but at Whole Foods it's spelled Pluot. I call it a pluot.
I don't know what that is.
It's a plum, basically.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, maybe they charge you more if they call it a pluot instead of a plum. But
I'd pay more for a pluot.
All that stuff. If
more.
you get the organic stuff at Whole Foods, it's so expensive. It's insane. Yeah.
So I'm with you. So you think because that gives you some sugar, you're saying
it gives you sugar, and then as you get into it, it really does become a treat. So, but it gives you sugar, but you get all the fiber of the fruit.
I hear. So I have a question about that.
I'm on
You're saying if you don't eat sugar for a while, I'm sure some listeners out here also don't eat sugar, then like you can have a plum or a peach and it tastes amazing to you.
Dan, when I have organic yellow peach now, there's nothing, if it's appropriately ripe, there's nothing better in the world, in the planet. It's amazing.
So that sounds great, but I have to convince myself that I want to get to that place. It's sort of like saying like, if someone's like, I'm just starving all the time, and so now a piece of bread tastes amazing to me. I'm like, well, I don't want to get there. Like, you know, I don't want to. It's sort of daunting to be like, I'm not sure. Do I want to get to where a peach is like?
Well, your taste buds do adapt. So if you eat whole natural food only, some of it starts tasting amazingly good. If you're eating highly processed, sugared foods, those fruits aren't going to taste as good because your set point is just completely different.
Because my plan for when I do I don't know if I want to get off Slovenly July in August, because like, what if I go to the Cape or something? Realistically, again, I try to plan ahead of time, and if I go to the Cape, I don't know if I'm going to want to be on walking around some Cape town like eating well, and I don't know.
I hear you. Yeah.
But if I get to September and I do it, the plan is, we've talked about, for all the different diets out there, is to just not buy any, just eat plain food, like eat fruits and vegetables and plain meats, and that's it.
If you do that, it's almost impossible not to get at your natural ideal
Right. Don't
weight.
worry about which types or how much or any of it.
Yeah, I don't worry about intermittent fasting, any of that stuff. We have 2 meals a day. So I'll wake up and I'll have coffee. I put a little butter in it. I put a little collagen protein in it. So I'm not technically fasting, I guess, but I enjoy my coffee. And then we go train. And then my son and I typically will come home at 2 for lunch. And we have, meat and vegetables or whatever for lunch. I might have a peach or something. Right. And then we go back and we do some more work and we train. We come back home, and at like 9:30, we have another similar meal. And I feel great. I never feel hungry or deprived or anything.
And as far as strategy goes, again, I think the way to do it, and what we're saying here, is to not be like, all right, I'll just stick to one cookie, per meal or something, right? Like, because it's easier to just be like,
it's easier not to,
it's sort of like
literally
you saying,
don't have it in the
house.
I need
to do the breathing every day.
Yeah.
It's like, I need to have no cookies.
Yeah.
And with jiu-jitsu, it's a little tricky because most people aren't going to go every day. But I think the parallel is, or for jiu-jitsu or other things that you can't do every day, or most people can't do every day. I mean, maybe some of people out there can and should do it every day. But the parallel would be, pick the actual number you're going to do it per week, right? Like, I'm really going to do it every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, or something like that. Like, whatever works for you, and then be like, make it part of your schedule. Part of where I suffer is, I'm like, I'll go in when I feel like it. And then you can not feel like it for a long time, or feel like, oh, have I not been in 2 weeks? What happened? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it's not in a schedule.
Yeah.
Right. So even if it's not every day, maybe it should be, people would be helped by having a schedule. For working out too is the same thing. If you're like, I'll work out when I feel like it or when I find the time, you often don't.
You don't. Yeah. You got to kind of like slot it in so it just gets done. Like, tonight, I'll go train at 5. Going to meet Mr. John Burke, super fan of Power of the Tribe podcast. We'll do some training.
Well-known super fan.
Well-known super fan. Yeah, he may be our biggest super fan. I don't know. And then there'll be a 6 o'clock class.
That's a challenge to other super fans out there.
Right. Well, Chris Ramos is coming on strong, man. Yeah. Commenting on all our YouTube videos. God bless you, Chris. Thank you so much for your support. But then after the class, we got a student, Robert, a young man who is cleaning up the gym for an hour afterwards. He wanted a little job. Did we have any work for him? We always try to support all our members. I'm always trying to help these young guys out, young women, whatever. And then we're trying to help other students. We're trying to, like, Leo Akiki has the best automotive business around here. So bring your car to him, please. That just makes total sense. So we're always trying to support each other. But when that guy's doing that hour of cleaning the gym, I'm there. I'm going to do an hour of aerobic conditioning. So it's like, it's just going to get done because I got to be there to lock up after this guy does the cleaning. So I'm going to get my aerobic conditioning in. And I've been doing that for a few weeks, and I feel better than ever.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing that works for me too is certain things. Sometimes for me, it's been working out, but it's like, I'm going to do it when I get up. Every weekday.
First thing.
As soon as I get up, it's part of getting up. I get up and I go to the gym.
That's pretty good.
Works a lot better than, I wonder if I'll have time today.
Yeah.
Not everyone can. I understand that, but,
Yeah.
But you can always set your alarm. Not not everyone, but a lot of people can say, I just set my alarm earlier.
So
if I have
did I
to.
tell you how I'm doing my aerobic conditioning?
I don't think so.
So, I guess there's 3 energy systems in the body. It's probably not absolutely correct, but a lot of people think this. There's an aerobic system where you're using oxygen to create energy. There's anaerobic. That's like sprinting, where you're not using oxygen per se to create energy. Then there's another one. I think it's the lactic system, somewhere between a sprint and a long distance. So there's a guy called Phil Maffetone, and he's a very successful trainer of endurance athletes, triathletes, things like this. And he came up with something, I think they call it the Maffetone method. So what you want to do is...
So how do you spell that?
That's
M-A-F?
good. M as in Mary, A, F as in Frank, F as in Frank, E-T-O-N-E, Maffetone, yeah. And so what you do is, if you probably would train anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes, and you keep your heart rate at a certain level for basically the whole workout. And the number he uses is 180 minus your age. So if you do 180 minus your age, if you're 50,
it's getting to be not
now
that
you're
even high.
130. It's not that high. So when you first start training this way, you can't do a lot of output. Like you start running and you go over 130, so you got to walk. And
so you stop it, because I'll go right up to 160 on like stairs, or
So in the Maffetone, this is for aerobic conditioning and cardiovascular health too. I think it's really good for your heart. You're keeping it at that level. But what happens, Dan, is if you do this consistently over time, your output increases dramatically. So then, if you do it for 6 months, you'll be running upstairs and keeping your heart rate lower. So some of the benefits of this training is that it's really good for your heart, your heart's health. Difficult to overtrain when you're going at that level. So you can train consistently without worrying about overtraining. And then when people do that type of training and then they go to compete in a race, they run the race at a higher heart rate, but their performance at that heart rate is improved as well. It doesn't just improve your heart rate at that lower rate. So it just seems like it makes a lot of sense, especially for health. And
so I don't know if this is a digression you want to get into or not, but you reminded me with your aerobic work and your weight loss and all this that you have been competing, and you just competed.
I did, Dan. Oh, that's right. I just competed at the Boston Open at UMass Boston.
Right. So we spoke on the last podcast that you were going to do it, and how it was actually very nerve-wracking for you because it was local and there's people you knew there. And
right, Dan. I think it was the most severe ego trap that I've ever been in. So about 3 weeks or so ago, my son, I was sitting on the mat with him and a couple other guys, and he said, "You should do the Boston Open." My son said that to me, and I had a dramatic stress response. Boo! My heart rate just rocketed. I got clammy, shortness of breath, all the symptoms. I was like, God damn. And
I'm sure no one sitting there knew you had that response. You probably looked
Probably
dead.
not. My son might have intuited that it would be stressful for me, but I'm so happy that he challenged me that way. It just, and I'm blessed to have him training with me and working with me, because he's made me such a better jiu-jitsu player and a better coach, I would think, too, for sure. And so this was a big challenge,
right,
and a big ego trap, right? Because you're local, you have local eyes on you. You feel so overvalued by your students that you feel like there's not a lot to gain if you win, and there's real esteem to lose if you lose the match. I only had one match, so. And you get local eyes on you, so there's a lot of people pulling for you, but there's probably a few people that wouldn't mind seeing you fall on your face, too. You know what I mean? So I think it was the most psychological pressure that I've experienced in a long time, especially for competing. And the real great upside of it, Dan, was that I found a new methodology to help me overcome this anxiety. So maybe I'll bring that book in next time. We'll talk about it. But I found this great book with some great techniques and tactics that and practices that I used for the 3 weeks leading up to it, and I felt great. So I feel like I was more present.
That was my next question. Yeah. Did you feel the anxiety, or you felt it?
I felt much less anxiety than I've ever had competing, much less, and I felt I was very present on the mat. You know what I mean? Very clear what was going on. I felt really good. I was able to look up at the scoreboard and see the score and the time. Sometimes if you're a little stressed out, it's hard to focus
Right.
on the match and the score and what's going on. So, yeah, I felt like I performed well, and if I hadn't taken up this challenge of competing in Boston, I probably wouldn't have got that booked in, and I probably would not have improved that part of my game, that mental part,
Right.
that dealing with the severe anxiety. So I'm even more confident now that when we go out later this month to compete at the Masters
And
Worlds.
don't you always feel, and we talk about this with jiu-jitsu a lot, that if you working on beating the anxiety for that match
Yeah.
actually changes you it's not just about beating the anxiety for that match. You've changed yourself,
Definitely.
right? You've like
You change
you're
your
going
nervous
to walk
system.
around
Yeah.
feeling better. I always say that with like people that are out of shape, or and convincing my son to run when he was on the cross country team, track team. And it was like, if you're going from I can't even run a mile
Mm-hmm.
to I can run at a good clip for 5 miles. It's not just about your running. Like, you're going to feel better all the time. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, without even noticing it. Like, you won't walk around like, oh, I feel so aerobically fit, but you do. You know, like you don't
do.
notice. Like, it just stands to reason the massive difference between I can't run half a mile and I can run 10 miles. You must feel different, right? Like, you must
think
just
so.
walk around feel. And so by the same token, being like, I don't know, if this applies to you, but say if you're someone that's anxiety ridden over a match and you get your head to a place where you're not anxiety ridden, I think that will affect you all the time.
I think it does, Dan, because on one level, you're actually changing your nervous system and how it's operating. You're optimizing it, improving it. So that's just great. But then the meta lesson is, oh, I can change myself. I can change my nervous system if I need to. And look at that. I had a challenge in front of me, and I came up with a plan. I applied the plan, and I got good results. That's a great feeling. And if I can do it for that, what else can I do it for? And you really get confident in the fact that if you have a goal and you have a plan and you work your plan, that you're going to get your goal. And that's just a great feeling.
Right. And we always try to convince people about this for jiu-jitsu, that because I'm sure we brought it up, and I'm sure we've all heard it. For you, it's probably been so long. For me, it's been a long time. But, doing something like jiu-jitsu, I still run into people that just finding out that I'm doing it. And you get sort of like, why do you expect to be fighting people? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you live in a suburb, you're not going to fight anyone your age. And it's like they're missing that point, right? It's like, I'm not doing
Missing
it
a
to
lot of
fight
points, yeah.
people. It's other benefits that you get.
Yeah. So I'm physically fitter and healthier than I probably have ever been in my life because of jiu-jitsu and because of competing realistically. Yeah, my nervous system is better. I've had this wonderful experience of approaching a challenge and coming out successful on the other side. So, yeah, it feels great.
We should mention that you won your match.
I did win, Dan.
I'm not sure
Thank
we
you.
actually said that. Congratulations on that.
Yeah, I try not to crow too much about that. I try to look at this as all as a grand process. So the other reason why I entered the tournament is that I have in my mind my ultimate goal is to be a Masters World Champion. Maybe this year or maybe 10 years from now. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but that's what I want to do. So if that's what I want to do, what do I need to do today to move a little closer to that goal? And entering that tournament was definitely a step that would move me much closer to the goal. So I'm so happy that I did it.
Right. We spoke about, and not on the podcast, but we spoke about the idea you were like, if the goal is, I'm basically crafting, quote, to paraphrase you, it's you're crafting your body into a machine that's able to win the
Right.
world championship.
Right.
So how do you craft that machine? And it's like, enter the tournament, eat these foods, don't eat these foods, and build yourself in
train
that
like
way.
this, do a little, yeah.
But I
That's
think
so well put, Dan.
That's
yeah.
also not a bad philosophy for a lot. Again, it does not have to be jiu-jitsu. It doesn't even have
Right.
to be a sport. You
Yeah.
want to craft yourself to be an organism that can accomplish some goal, right? Like, I want to be.
Yeah. If you just look at a business career, what kind of machine would experience more success, likely to experience success in a business environment and make yourself into that machine? I mean, you're just
Right.
going to have more success, right?
Yeah, I was thinking for anything, if friends that want to be writers, like, all right, what sort of writing machine, how
So
often
that's
should
a
you
great.
write?
Let's think about that, Dan. I think then you should read a lot of literature that you love, right?
Yeah.
And then you should be writing a lot too. You should be doing both of those things.
Right.
I would
Seeking
think.
out advice and,
Right.
the things what are the things you need to do?
Yeah.
Because I think we all fall into the trap of like, I want something, but you don't necessarily work all the time for it.
Right. And I think we have this, I think it's very American mythology of Rocky Balboa, where I'm going to kind of be wasting my life, and then I'm just going to cram for 8 weeks before the big fight and show tremendous courage and still come up short, but it's still great because I had so much courage in the moment. And that courage has a lot of value, and we do value that, but what we're missing is the preparation and the long-term planning and the process.
Right, like Rocky learned by Rocky V, where he had to be in Russia,
right,
and running through the snow with
that's it.
With a like the tree trunk on his back. But I also think that a lot of people have this, I don't know if it's American or not, but this vision of like, it'll just somehow come to me. And you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of like, if say a writer, they're like, I'm just going to, they sort of picture the angle and they're like, I'll be a famous author, and not sort of thinking through the process.
I mean, they put it on the vision board and then they wait for it to
We've talked about the vision,
up.
right?
Yeah.
Or like the vision board of, you could be like, I'm going to be world champion, and like I sit here and I just picture myself, because you hear that a lot too, right? Like I picture myself, my hand being raised, I picture, like, and it's like, yeah, but that's not,
Well, I'll tell you,
it's
Dan,
the
I
process.
do that visualization. So every day, part of my practice is I do 5 minutes of a cold shower at the end of my shower. So at the end of my shower, I just turn the knob so it's all the way cold, but there's still a stream coming out, and I time myself for 5 minutes. But in there, that's part of what I'm thinking is like wearing the gold medals, being a world champion. But then after you dry off and get out of the shower, you got to say, well, what would that guy do today?
If you do that, only that,
right,
is not going to do anything.
Probably not good enough. Yeah. Like that's what our T-shirt that we had the other day was. What would a world champ do? So I keep thinking about
Especially
that.
people with talent, right? Like if you're talented at jiu-jitsu, it's like, I'll be world champ. It's like you still have to plan and work your way through. Or like MMA fighters where they're...
Dan, I had this years ago. I probably told you this story where there was a couple that my wife and I were friends with, and they were a lovely couple, really nice, engaging people, just really good people. And the woman said, my dream is to be a writer. I really want to be a writer. So I naively took her on her word about that. And I had recently read a book, or maybe I'd read it a couple of years before that, by this woman. Her name is Brenda Ulan, and she's a writer, and sort of a self-taught writer from Minnesota, I believe. And she had this cool book called Strength to Your Sword Arm, or she might have had another book that was like, If You Want to Write. That was the name of the book, If You Want to Write. And she was this Brenda Ulan was a very cool woman, like her kind of self-made feminist and really interesting, smart person. So I ordered that book. I didn't just send her a link. I ordered that book on Amazon, and I sent it to this woman because she's like, it's her dream to be a writer. And then, there were a couple that we would see every once in a while. We didn't see them that often. Then we saw them. We got together like a month later. And I said, so what did you think of the book? And you know what she said?
I'm guessing she didn't read the book.
She said, what book? I said, that book, If You Want to Write. She goes, oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't get to look at it yet. And I was like, oh, so what have you been reading? Well, I really haven't been reading in the last month.
Or writing, probably.
Well, definitely not writing, Dan. So then I realized, oh, you don't want to be a writer. You want to fantasize about being like a famous writer without doing any writing or reading.
Right.
Yeah, so I think some people fall into that trap, unfortunately.
What was it, the show? I think we talked about it once, where it's that Jerry Seinfeld, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, and he's talking to Alec Baldwin. And Alec Baldwin, they both knew.
Are funny,
they
right?
both knew about it, so I guess
Yeah.
it's like a thing that performers know about. And I think, I forgot what they called it, but it was like they thought that like the talent police or something would just show up at your house. Like they said, like aspiring actors, aspiring comedians. Yeah, exactly.
Are you in there? We need your talent in Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, you just think they're like, I'm such a good actor, or I'm so funny that like there's someone's just gonna. I'm just a funny guy. I think Seinfeld was talking about people that are just like, they don't even work on their craft. They're like, I'm funny and I'll just be famous. And
well, he
like,
has his famous method, right? You've heard of Jerry Seinfeld's method?
I don't know.
So a comedian asked him, and he's famous for saying, here's what you do. You want to be a stand-up comic. Sit down, the pen and piece of paper, write as many jokes as you can that day, Go over to your calendar, put an X on the calendar because you wrote jokes that day. Wake up the next day, write a bunch of jokes, put another X. Try to get as many X's in a row on your calendar as possible. And
that could apply to a lot of things as well.
and most people do not do that. But if you did that, Dan, if you wrote jokes every single day for years, how could you not end up being successful?
And then you have to keep performing them and see which ones people are laughing at.
Yeah. But even if you just did the writing, you would probably become a pretty successful comic.
Yeah. Well, if you're funny.
If you're funny. Well, that's exactly what that last point was, right? The small actions repeated over time transform us. So that's kind
not
of the Jerry
bad
Seinfeld
idea out there
X thing.
yeah, I'm thinking about it for myself too. If I want to commit to it, it's almost daunting to commit to it, but also for people listening, like buy your own little calendar.
Dan, I have one up on my door in my bedroom. It's an annual calendar, so it has all the days and months, one spot. And when I started the strict eating healthy, no booze, I wrote on day one, day two, so forth. Now I'm on day 20-something or other. And it helps because you get the reward of seeing that progress, and you get motivated to.
Because I'm picturing a calendar where, like, you can personalize it, right? Because I'm picturing I could have one, it gets an X if I work out, and it gets a circle around it if I eat healthy that day.
That's pretty
and
good.
Then you can stare at it, and if a month goes by and you're like, Jesus, look at this, and you're like, I have like 2 X's, and like, then you have no excuse. You're like, I've been a mess. I haven't been doing it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah, you get visual feedback.
Because I'm definitely someone that, like, I love lists, and I love, like,
mine. I wake
so this
up.
Can't be on
there it is on my
This
bedroom
can't be
door.
on my phone. I would, you know what I mean? It has to be paper and pen, like, on my door or something like
Mine's
that.
a big thing. I think it's like encased in plastic. You know what I mean?
I need
What is
it
that
on a
called?
wall, though. I can't be like, oh, I'll just check. I'll pull up this Excel file.
No way.
And it's staring me in the face. And then, you just look, because, then you want, especially then you've got like those 4 X's in a row, and you're like, I want to get another X here. And, like, it's irrational, but people do it. People love it, like.
Definitely. It's good accountability, self-accountability.
There, see?
Yeah.
Remember what I said earlier in the podcast? Even if you just have to sift through other advice that you don't like, that one piece of advice could be big. Just get that put that calendar up.
Yeah, definitely.
But, and as we said, but the recurring theme is not only jiu-jitsu. That was Jerry Seinfeld becoming a comedian. Yeah. But it can apply to jiu-jitsu or fitness or whatever you want. Looking for a job.
One of the all-time most successful comedians, I would add, right? I mean, financially, I don't know if anybody's done better than him.
He's close to a billionaire.
Yeah.
But then if you can't lie to yourself. I don't lie to myself too much, but it's staring you in the face.
Sneak around behind your back?
I can be dishonest a little bit. I'm subtly dishonest with myself. But I think some people are like, well, I'm trying. And it's like that calendar makes you stare at it.
Yeah.
And go, you'd be like, I'm trying to be a writer. It's like, well, let's look at the calendar. How many days did you write? You know what I mean? Like you can't, it hits you with the truth. Dan,
especially if life is good, if you have a certain amount of financial well-off situation, you can go to dinners, go on vacations, you could turn around, and the calendar is blank for the whole year if you're not careful, right? Yeah, interesting. You know what? I think we're coming up on an hour here, believe it or not. So let's wrap it up. So we got the...
I asked before we started if we were going to get to all 52 points.
We didn't get outside the introduction. Yeah, but we got 2 really good points in the introduction. Exaggerate your new moves, your new techniques. And then small actions repeated over time transform us. So that like kind of daily thing, the Jerry Seinfeld calendar in particular, it's going to work, and it's worked for me, for sure. Great. And if you can undertake a challenge that makes you feel really uncomfortable, and then find a plan. So that's the other thing, Dan. Let me speak to that. I felt really uncomfortable, a lot of anxiety about doing this tournament in Boston, and I didn't just white knuckle it and grit my teeth. I went out and bought a book. I learned some strategies, some tactics. I practiced. You know what I mean? I put the work into the process. That's the beautiful thing about being process focused. Because if I put all that work in the process and then I went and I lost, I still would have gained something. You know, if I just white knuckled it and showed up, and then I didn't win my match, I didn't perform well, I probably wouldn't feel that great about it. But it's like you're guaranteeing yourself a benefit by by putting in a good process.
Right. Make a plan.
Make a plan and work the plan.
I might myself take advice from this podcast of buy that calendar. It's almost scary to buy it because I know it could be painful to stare at it. It'll make
I got
you
it.
do
I got a big Sharpie where I write on it.
Yeah.
And it's good. Definitely good. Okay, Dan, that was awesome. Thank you again for another terrific podcast, and thank you folks for listening. Please share this. Please rate, review it, tell all your friends about it. Tattoo our logo on your body somewhere. I think
Anywhere,
that would be good.
Anywhere on your body.
Yep. You'll get, if you do that, we'll give you definitely a free T-shirt, and we'll bring you in here and interview
Will we?
you. Yeah.
Okay.
T-shirt and live interview if they tattoo our logo on their body.
Yeah, and we're not even picky about where on your body.
Doesn't have to be that big either.
Yeah.
At least maybe 2 inches, but yeah.
What if you already have the tattoo? Because a lot of people
Just reach out
there,
to us and let us know.
Right.
We'll get you in here and take care of you.
That's still good enough.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.